Hey, it's Ben. Rahul and I started this podcast because we love hanging out with fellow trial lawyers and sharing ideas that can make us all better. And both of our firms also regularly collaborate with other lawyers across the countries in cases where we can add value. If you're interested in collaboration, or even if you just have a case or an idea that you want to bounce off us or brainstorm, Rahul and I are going to be hosting confidential case workshops the first Wednesday of each month. So here's how it works. If you have a case or an idea that you want to talk about or brainstorm with us, just send me an email to ben@elawvate.net, ELAWVATE.net, or go online to elawvate.net and submit a case workshop request. We will schedule you for a confidential 30-minute Zoom meeting where we can talk about your case to see if we can help. If you feel like there would be good value in collaborating on the case further, we can talk about that. If not, that's okay too. We enjoy helping other trial lawyers because we know someday you'd be willing to do the same for us if we needed your help. So again, if you're interested in workshopping your case with us, just send an email to ben@elawvate.net or fill out a case workshop request at elawvate.net. And Rahul and I will look forward to chatting with you soon. It's time to talk about some of our sponsors, and I'm doing that today with Robert Ingalls from LawPods. Today's episode is brought to you by Steno. Steno is a company that has rethought court reporting services. Not only do they allow plaintiffs' trial lawyers to defer the cost until the end of the case, but they've developed their own interface that allows you to better handle and manage exhibits and visuals during the deposition. Check them out.
And what is it about Steno that you really feel like is their main thing? What makes them special?
You know, I think it's really critical for lawyers to have that option to defer the costs of depositions, particularly in cases where you're doing dozens of depositions. It can be a very significant part of the overall case costs, and it's nice not to have to incur that until you get your money in at the end of the case.
And you can listen to the Season 4, Episode 17 with Steno President Dylan Ruga. We'll link that in the show notes for you.
Yeah, Dylan's a great guy and a really interesting episode, so I encourage you to listen and see what they're all about. Our show today is also brought to you by our friends at Expert Institute. They've been a sponsor of this show since the beginning. My good friend Michael Talvey was on the show, and Robert can tell you when that was. What was his episode, Robert?
So we had Michael Talvey on Season 4, Episode 22, and we'll link that one for you as well.
Yeah, and Expert Institute is really the go-to place now for plaintiffs' trial firms to locate the best experts to help them win their case. We've been working with Expert Institute for 4 years now, and they're an indispensable part of our practice. It's really hard for me to imagine going back to a day without Expert Institute. So they're a great company. They provide a great service, and I would encourage you to try them out. Today's show is also brought to you by Smart Advocate. Smart Advocate is the case management software that we use to run our law firm. We've been using it now for over 4 years. All of our staff and our team love it, and it's done a great job managing a complex docket of cases. Some cases are one-offs. We have cases where we have over 100 clients, so it's pretty versatile and a good program and good people. We also had them on the show, right, Robert?
Yeah, I think we may have had them more than once, but I think the most recent episode was with Claude Simpson. It was a bonus episode in Season 3, which will also be linked for you.
Our show today is also brought to you by FileVine. FileVine is a brand new sponsor of the show, and FileVine offers a product called Lead Docket, which is probably the best product on the market for managing new case intakes and leads. And if you're a law firm like ours that spends any dollars at all marketing to bring cases through the door, you know how important it is that you don't want to miss any of those, and you want to have an organized way to make sure your team follows up with every lead and turns any potential case into money to bring money back in the door. So Lead Docket is the best way to do that. Check it out and put it to work in your practice.
And I couldn't help but notice you have a shiny new website at GideonAsin.com. Who does that for you?
So our friends at Hype Legal, Micah and Tyler, we just hired them to redevelop our website. They did a wonderful job. The aesthetics are beautiful. The coding is really slick. They do a great job. It's a real pleasure to work with Micah and Tyler because unlike many of the other digital marketing firms, when you work with them, you deal directly with Micah and Tyler. You're not dealing with some young account executive that doesn't know anything about coding or your business. You're dealing directly with the principals. They're very responsive, and they've got a great eye for aesthetics. So check out our new website if you like it. Give Micah and Tyler a call, and they can do the same great work for you.
And I got to say, I'm hearing people say that somewhere around episode 2 of this podcast, it just started sounding a lot more crisp, really good, really professional. What happened there?
You know, it's funny you should ask that, Robert.
I'm the worst.
So we decided finally after 4 seasons of kind of winging it, and we did an okay job, but we thought we could do better and get better sound quality, have a better produced show. So we finally bit the bullet, and we've hired LawPods to be our official producer. So not only they've been editing the show, but now they're also producing it. So you can thank the better intro, the better outro, and the better sound quality to the great folks at LawPods. And if you're a lawyer who's interested in putting together a podcast for yourself, I would definitely give them a call. They can help you out.
All right, I think that's our ads. Let's get back to the content.
Welcome to the Elawvate podcast. I'm Rahul Ravipudi.
I'm Ben Gideon.
I saw you walk in and you had a big parka on. How cold is it in Maine right now?
Oh, it's not too bad. It's in the mid-30s, but nothing like the beautiful weather we had out in Scottsdale last week.
It's great
seeing
you.
Very enjoyed that. It was good seeing you out there too.
No, that was awesome. It's good seeing everybody, actually.
Even though very short visit. Everything good with the brother-in-law?
Yes. We had interesting dialogue while I was with Ben, with my brother-in-law, but everything is A-okay. Oh my gosh, that's going to be a story that we're not going to share on the podcast, but we'll share in person.
Yeah, I figured it wasn't shareable, but it's just the thing when you're the resident lawyer in the family and anyone has an issue, they call you to try to troubleshoot it.
Pick your brain.
Yeah. With that, we're thrilled to have Elizabeth Larrick on the podcast today. Elizabeth's a trial lawyer and a trial consultant. You're based out of Texas, right?
That's right. Yep. I'm in Austin, Texas. Thanks for having me.
And helps trial lawyers all over the country. She also has a very popular podcast that's there to help trial lawyers prepare for cases and for trial. And she's going to talk to us today about trial strategy and the use of focus groups. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. What I'm really curious about is, Ben, did you finally get that lobster over? Did you finally ship it?
Not only did I ship it, but it arrived, the dozen live lobsters Rahul enjoyed, along with steak. So we had a big surf and turf party.
Oh, yeah. It was
So
my
that
wife's
was good.
birthday, and so we had a bunch of people over. And I've never actually in my life held a live lobster before. So it took a little getting used to, even though the rubber bands were around the claws. But those things, they don't mess around.
There's a reason they have the rubber bands there.
It was awesome, Elizabeth. And I highly recommend that everybody have Ben send over 12 lobsters.
Well, I thought that was part of the guest, like, hey, welcome. The lobster's on its way.
Yeah.
Our best guests do get a dozen lobsters shipped to them. So if you perform exceptionally well, that might
All
happen.
right. I like the competition.
After Rahul got his lobsters, I decided this was kind of a fun little thing. So there was a lawyer who'd referred us a case that we settled for a lot of money, and I sent him a dozen lobsters too. It's kind of a dilemma because you send the lobster. So I sent it to his law office. He's also out in California. And then I started to worry, well, what if the lobsters show up there and nobody opens the package or they're not prepared for it and they might freak out. So the day before they arrived, I emailed them and said, hey, you got something coming. You should be looking out for it. But it would probably be better if people weren't aware that they were coming and then they kind of opened a package and found a dozen live lobsters staring back at them.
Very excited. I mean, it'd be a good surprise.
Yeah. No, I got a good company now that will ship them for me, and it's pretty easy. That was the holdup with Rahul. It only took me 3 years to pay his bet, but it was just trying to figure out the logistics of it was harder than I expected. So Anyway,
But I get some interest along with it because there was a pound of beautiful shrimp that came with the lobster too.
they threw the
So
shrimp
three,
in for free. I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
understand that. Yeah. Well, Elizabeth, what's your specialty there? If you're going to pay off a bet, are you going to send us like some steaks or what?
Yeah,
Barbecue.
I think steaks, or if I could, I don't know how well it would really travel, but like some Franklin barbecue would probably
Yeah.
be like the best.
Yeah.
Is that the go-to versus Salt Lake?
Yeah, I mean, Salt Lake is still, it's good, but Franklin barbecue's just got some brisket. It's hard to
Can't
beat.
beat.
Before we get into focus groups and stuff, why don't you give us a little bit of a background, your bio?
Sure, sure. Yeah, so I basically, went to law school like most of us on this podcast, graduated, and started working in plaintiff personal injury and really loved it. I always wanted to be in the courtroom. I tried criminal, tried family law, just wasn't a really good fit, but personal injury was a great fit. And so started off there and just really made my way eventually back to Texas. I went to University of Oklahoma Law School and made my way back. And as most people do, I think they eventually find themselves running their own practice. So I ran my own practice for several years, but along the way, really just gravitated toward, at the time it was called Reptile, now it's called Edge, towards that way of setting up cases and trying cases, and had an opportunity to actually go work in the Keenan law firm. And so I did that for about a year and tried cases all over Vegas, Seattle. Really got a good eye-opening experience with trying really large cases, weeks and weeks of cases. So it was really a great experience. Came back and still just ran my firm and really got gravitated towards helping lawyers doing focus groups. So I was doing focus groups on my own. There's a couple of us here in Austin that would get together and, share some space and get people. And so it was a great way to just do little snapshots here and there. And people just kind of started gravitating and said, "Hey, we just do this for me." like I don't want to come do it. Will you just do it for me? And so that really kind of took off, and then decided right before the pandemic to go all in and do almost all consulting work. And then of course the pandemic hit and just turned everything virtual. So that's really kind of the ride of where I got here, and just really enjoy helping lawyers make decisions in their case using focus groups, or helping difficult clients with witness prep.
Just going back to your background, why was criminal and family law not really a right fit, and why is personal injury something right in your wheelhouse?
I mean, these are wonderful places where people do amazing work. And I think your heart really has to be in family law. I mean, it's really draining, and there's really no end to it. And obviously with with personal injury, like, it's some people's their worst time in their life, and they need help with all different facets. And I love being able to help with all different kinds of things when it comes to that. But, there comes a point where you actually get them through, right? Like you finish and they're in it, they're able to kind of move into a different place. Family law doesn't really happen. And
Yeah.
criminal, I mean, at the end of the day, you're really trying to just push a bunch of files. On either side of those things. I worked in a criminal law office for a while in undergrad. And so it's really just you're pushing people through. It's not really necessarily feel as helpful. And so personal injury really fit that you get to have a great relationship with these clients. You get to help them through sometimes the worst, things that could ever happen to them, and get them on the other side of that. So it just felt like more of a helpful place than family law or criminal.
In terms of your work with the Keenan law firm and exposure to the reptile, is that something that still kind of drives your thought process and philosophy, or has there been a progression or change since you left? And then what aspects of that are you still using today?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of it ends up, yeah, definitely still use it. I mean, I think smart trial lawyers will continue to learn always. But I think there's going to be at some place a little bit of a framework that you always kind of fall back to. And I got to teach, how to do this stuff, and that significantly increases your ability to do it yourself. So teaching for almost 10 years there, and just really feeling like I want to pass on what I know, but also, yeah, absolutely that framework. But just adding on, I mean, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of great other strategies out there, but a lot of it just comes down to what are you comfortable with when you're communicating, and how does it work for you? But yeah, definitely that's always kind of the backbone for me as far as thinking about trying cases and strategy.
So tell us about your process. If a lawyer's interested in working with you, at what stage of the case would you tend to first get involved? And then how do you work and collaborate to help?
Yeah, I mean, people just come with problems. Most of the time, people are at a crossroads of trying to decide, hey, our mediation failed. Trial's still pretty far off, but we're on the fence still. And so sometimes we just run a really short focus group to help them make that decision, right? Help them with their clients make that decision, get that outside point of view. And sometimes people come to me when they're on the doorstep of trial and they're like, we have this big nasty problem with liability. And we have tried these few things. We think that they work, but we're not 100% sure. We want some feedback from a focus group. And so that's where people come in as well. And then I have some lawyers that before they even file a case, they will run just a very basic focus group to figure out, like, does this stick? Do people care? Or is this something that really at the end of the day, people are going to blame somebody else and, it's just not going to be a viable case. And so the process is typically come in with a problem, you name it. Hey, we've got this really large life care plan and I'm really worried because there's a life care plan on the other side, and we've got just some of these things that we're worried about on damages. And then with liability, it's, sometimes it's really complicated. There's several different defendants, and it's like, how much is going to be on each one? And how do we really, there's so many details. How do we skinny this down to know what really rings? And so that's a lot of how we end up just deciding, okay, how long of a focus group do you want? And do you want to do more than one? And then we really spend a lot of time planning. I get to know the case and I get to help them really figure out. Sometimes lawyers want to present, and that's great. Sometimes they don't at all. And so I help do that as well. But typically I always am in there moderating because it's so hard as somebody who you put your heart and soul into a case and you're trying to make the right decision and advise your client, and it's hard to be neutral. So that's generally where I come in to always ask questions and just get the good information without, maybe tipping the scales along the way.
So what's the format of one of your focus groups?
So we use Zoom, and typically it's 8 to 10 people. Sometimes we get a few extra people in there, but really it's it's a presentation, whether it's just the facts or whether it's an opening or whether it's a mediation statement, whether it's just demo clips, and then it's just conversation. Tell me what you think. What could be missing here? What was confusing? And so we just end up having kind of really quality conversations with people, and then be able to ask follow-ups as well. And so that's kind of where a lot of it, and the lawyers typically, if they're not presenting, they'll be in there watching anonymously, but that's typically our format. And they're 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours. Most of the people that I work with don't have a giant bag of money to work with when it comes with clients or comes with cases, because we're fronting everything. And so that's why for me, it's when we package it in a little bit smaller thing, instead of doing these long all day in-person focus groups or mock juries, it's much more manageable for lawyers, as well as the amount of information you get out of it is very much, it's smaller, and it allows people to really understand it, grasp it, and then move into action items.
And where do you get your focus group jurors?
I get them from Facebook, Craigslist. We have a pretty good referral program. I mean, I've been doing them for almost 10 years. So I had a lot of in-person groups. And then basically we really just kind of, work with those people to, hey, give me a referral, have a referral program with them. And occasionally, if we have something that's kind of a one-off, then I will use a recruiter to help get some people in there.
Are you using jurors from the venue where the case is, or does it not matter in your view where they're located?
I think it really depends on what you're doing. I think for the most part, it doesn't necessarily matter. But I mean, I think if I tried to get some people from Maine to tell me about something that happened in California, it might be a little bit of a problem. But as long as you're kind of it's not like a case that's super specific to geography. But I think as you get closer to trial, you want to get closer to your venue. But here in Texas, I mean, we have some really small venues where there's 14,000 people in your jury pool. That's it. Like, we don't want to taint your jury pool. So typically we just try to match it. But for the most part, most of my general ones, we just have kind of a general kind of gathering of people across Texas, Oklahoma, and the surrounding states.
You've done like over 1,000 of these, right? Tell us some stories about how somebody used your focus group data and results and then how it played out in trial.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One of the most recent ones that we had, and this happens a lot actually, where a lawyer will come to me and they say, "Hey, we have dash cam footage. We feel like it's really clear, but of course now liability, they're flip-flopping, they're denying responsibility now. So we're going to trial in 2 weeks. I have no idea what the defense is thinking because they took this really unusual position." And so we ran a 2 hour focus group, and there were definitely some things that they needed to shore up on liability, where it was some explanations they needed on direct exam from the client, and also very specific details that the jury needed to know very upfront, because even though we're all familiar with Interstate 35, which is the interstate of Texas speed limit changes, there's different rules in different places, and they needed to know very specifically. And so in those 2 hours, gleaned a lot of things that needed to be added, small tweaks, I would say. And then also he learned that really they weren't shocked or surprised that the company completely changed their tune. Like, that didn't surprise me. That's what I would do. That's just a good lawyer tactic. So they weren't really bothered by that, and so they were able to kind of tweak their opening and really get into some important things on direct exam with their client, and they end up settling right before the jury got it because they had a couple of other issues as far as like getting excess to come in and things like that. They were so glad to have that extra information just to be able to tweak and put things first and what was on their minds. And again, they thought liability was in the bag because of this video, but it just wasn't.
Yeah, it's sometimes we'll circulate some videos in our office and just hearing the different perspectives where some people look at it and go, "Oh, this is a clear winner," and others will look at it and go, "That's a clear loser." And it's so interesting how,
Yeah, and I mean,
yeah,
it's whenever we have video of the crash, or whatever the event, I should say. I mean, it's always fascinating, and I always tell people, like, gotta test that stuff because you may think it's totally clear, and they will point out 10 different things you didn't even think about. And sometimes they create things that are not on the video that you just want to make sure that you dispel and know about before you walk in and go to trial.
It's an interesting observation. How you present the video is such a important skill in any case where there's a video. Rahul, you had that case involving the swimming pool
yeah,
death. Was it a death, right?
yeah,
And I remember you had a video, and as I recall, you had kind of given some kind of background about what you're going to see, and then it really framed it so that when you started to watch the video, you were looking for the right things and you watched it in the right way. But if you hadn't given that framework, maybe you would be looking at it and see something totally different.
yeah. Part of the teaching of a drowning experience, and we had a neurologist in the case who explained how your body reacts. And one of the arguments that the defense wanted to go down was that the kid was reckless for being in this situation and that the parents were bad parents for allowing him to go to a school event that was a lifeguarded event, even though he was a good swimmer. And as you started to see this video, you could see him waving his hand about 15 times before he finally went under with lifeguards so close by. So, you're totally right. As Elizabeth was talking, I was just thinking about images like that, videos, but also like trial graphics. I've seen some amazing trial graphics or animations, videos, and then I've seen the exact opposite, where it almost proves the other side's case, and why anybody would be celebrating it makes me want to scratch my head. Have you dealt with any of that where you kind of see something that a lawyer's brought in for a focus group to test that out, and maybe even before you tested it, you kind of had a feeling as to how it was going to play out?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I think, like you said, you get a feeling pretty quickly when you do a lot of focus groups or do a lot of juries. Like, I think that's the opposite of what you're going for, but we're gonna we'll put it up in front of them and see. I don't want to bet against you before we get in there, but yeah, I've definitely had it where it was like, oh, you you just nailed what their whole tactic in this visual, or whether it be an animation or even just like you said, a still graphic. But I mean, you just say, hey, we're gonna let the ponies run, and I'm not gonna get in the way of this, and that's what most of most of the focus group is just really getting out of the way to really listen and get everyone to talk in and chime in. And, do you guys use focus groups at all?
Yes, a lot, and I love them. And I think virtual focus groups are fantastic. And I was going to ask you if, in hindsight, it probably played out great that you switched to virtual because it's probably easier to become nationwide and do a whole lot more focus groups over a short time. But I think they're so valuable in understanding whether you're framing the case right and those tweaks, like you said, that you have to make. But I've done mainly sort of clopenings, where you do this closing argument, opening statement, and then the defense does the same, and maybe we'll have our clients testify, and so that the focus groups gets a little flavor as to who they are. But I like what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, those are so helpful. I think the clopening ones because, and especially having a little bit of client testimony, because for us in our minds, that's the easiest thing for us to understand. And I think we as lawyers get a little bit like, ooh, maybe I'm not going to know what they're saying, or they're going to say something I don't understand. And I'm like, listen, it's really not like, it's just being able to sit back and kind of sometimes listen to some of that hard stuff. But most of the things people are really obvious about how they feel and think. So they're just going to tell you. And sometimes it takes a little bit more of like, okay, well, let's go back and think about like what we presented and how we presented it and what we're going for. And that's why some of the shorter ones, can be really helpful if you're just going to run clips, and I think that's the easiest thing. Sometimes if you're just getting starting out is doing an opening is easy, or just running clips of, your client or the main other fact witnesses to see how they think about these people and how they put the story together based on that testimony.
So we've done a lot of focus groups over the years, and in the old days we used to do the in-person focus groups, and honestly I miss those a little bit because they're a good opportunity to be in the same room with people, which we do infrequently these days. And when you get into a courtroom, if that's the first time you've seen other human beings in close proximity in a while, it can be a little jarring,
Yeah.
But we've moved completely to the Zoom focus groups as well now, and we use them differently now than we used to. And I'm curious on your thoughts about this. So what we do with them now is, in every case we have that's heading towards trial, we do 2 Zoom focus groups in order to issue spot and identify major shortcomings with our case or questions that jurors may have, all for the purpose of making sure that we present the case, both sides of the case, as forcefully as we can when we do our big data study. We now have moved to big data more for predictive use and really drilling down on issues in the case, because I just feel like with the number of respondents you're getting in that, it ends up being a little bit more reliable, because if you get 8 or 10 people in a focus group, it can really skew one way or another. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on the relationship between these Zoom focus groups, small numbers of people, versus the big data stuff that's becoming more popular, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think big data has been there. And I think for us in our minds, it is, like you said, you just drew the exact thing, which is it feels more reliable when you have 3,000 people or 400 people who are basically looking at it. And a lot of people can't afford to do some of those big data ones. And so that's kind of where this kind of fits in for people who they don't have that couple $1 million case, but they're working on the biggest case in their office. And so if you just do one issue spotting focus group and at least open your mind that, oh, I need to look at this. But for people who I always tell them, like, listen, if you want to test reliability, then you need to probably be aiming to do more than one of these things. Again, like you just said, 8 to 10 people, and they all go with you. Then you can take it to the bank. Like, well, wait a second here. So most of the time, that's why I say, like, because their Zoom is just so easy to turn on. And right now, you're going to find it's pretty easy to find 8 to 10 folks to jump on and present it, listen to what they have to say, do it again, and really be able to just say, okay, all right. What I think most people are still trying to open up the idea in their brains is just to go out and get that outside perspective. And so to try and convince someone like, we'll do a data dump, and then, it's like, well, wait a second. So there's always a little bit of people a rub of people know that they need to be doing it, but there's a resistance there. So that's why like I feel like this is like, it's like this is the gateway. Like take a step in, like do a Zoom focus group, and then as you kind of get really used to getting that feedback, you want more. Like you want to get to that large data set and really feel comfortable. And so I know people who kind of combine the same thing, but very much kind of probably what you guys use them for, Ben, is like, again, taking that issue and going all the way down that rabbit trail with 3,000 people and figuring out where they are and then feeling really good. Like, okay, I've shored this up. I feel good about this particular issue.
What do you think is in your experience, is the main reason or driver for people being resistant to wanting to do a focus group?
I think there's a couple things. Right off the bat, people always say cost, right? Like that's the easiest word that can come out of our mouths. Number two is generally we're just too busy, right? We've got too many files. Like I don't have time to do that. I don't have a case that's big enough to do that. And I think a lot of it is we as plaintiff personal injury, like we have to assess the risk for our own office of investing more in a case. And so I think sometimes it feels like more risk. People worry they're not going to understand what the feedback is or how to use it. And that's why, again, I try to start on, let's do the basic, and then you'll really feel better about understanding the issues. But I think those are some of the things. I think a lot of people they're just waiting for that big case. I'm waiting. Once I get one of these cases, then I'll go do all this stuff.
Right, right. But I bet a lot of the results and information you get from a focus group when you're working with a particular lawyer or law firm, they can probably apply a lot of that to a lot of their cases.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always tell people when they come in, we're going to do a car wreck case. I'm like, okay, you got to tell them these 5 things. I know it doesn't have anything to do with your case. Like no one is drunk driving, but please, for the love of Pete, just tell them that because they're always going to ask, so absolutely. I find that often with people when they'll come to me and they'll say, hey, here's this case. Don't forget about that other focus group we did that's still got really valuable information about the exact same kind of situation.
Take your playbook to the next level by joining a legal network of all-stars at psrplaybook.com. psrplaybook.com is a free digital legal library created exclusively for plaintiff lawyers by the nationally recognized personal injury law firm of Panish Shea Ravipudi LLP, and features video content showcasing the tactics, strategies, and concepts implemented by some of the industry's most successful trial attorneys. PSRplaybook.com promotes learning, shared knowledge, collaboration, and best practices. Get in the game and see for yourself by joining our national network of plaintiff lawyers. Subscribe now at PSRplaybook.com and learn from the best.
So you've done so many focus groups over more than a decade. What are the kind of biggest misconceptions and mistakes you think lawyers routinely make about their own cases that then are borne out in the focus groups?
There are mistakes that I made. I had, it was like, this case is, worth X amount. And in reality, people just value things differently. And we, I think sometimes try to be formulaic about it.
Do you think lawyers are undervaluing the cases or tend to overvalue the cases?
I think they kind of tend to overvalue.
See, that's fascinating because I actually had the opposite thought. When we do the big data, the numbers that come back are always higher than what I would have expected. I don't know. Rahul, have you had any?
Yeah, it's the same thing that I've experienced too, which is, well, there's sometimes where it's undervalued and sometimes that it's overvalued, and it's been insightful in both ways. But when you undervalue a case, it's just more mortifying from my perspective. It's like, oh my gosh, I was about to ask for half of what I should have been asking. And it's definitely makes you want to commit more to doing the work to get all the data that you can.
Do you think, Elizabeth, that lawyers may be undervaluing the big cases and overvaluing the smaller cases?
Yes. I think what happens is there's a false equivalent. Oh, I've got a life care plan that's worth $7 million, therefore my cases. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's just not an automatic for folks. Like, lost wages, it's not an automatic value upgrade. And that's kind of sometimes where I think people are like, oh, well, we have these things. And I'm like, well, yeah, but what I always hear constantly from focus groups is like, well, but what does their wife say? But what does their coworker say? Like, what is their, they want those things that are more relatable in their lives to help back it up. And there are definitely places where people come in and completely undervalue their case. And I'm just like, oh, I can just tell you before we even get in there, like, that's not, you're not valuing it in, in the right place. But I think we just, when you look at it every day, all day, and there's so many things, where's the life care plan? Where's the expert for this? Where's, we kind of sometimes forget like, oh, some of the easiest, smallest things that inject value, we just sometimes overlook because, oh, we're not before trial yet. So why would I go get before and afters? Why would I go think about talking to, the coworkers or the boss or, that kind of stuff, where it's sometimes just, again, opening their minds to being curious and being listening. And, oh, that's something super simple I can do. And it doesn't cost me anything. And it will significantly help the value in the case.
How about on liability side, win-loss? Have you seen a trend over time in one direction or another?
Tell me more about that question.
Well, I mean, we're hearing about more plaintiffs' verdicts today than we used to, and it seems like there's at least a trend towards more receptive juries, at least in certain parts of the country. Is that reflected in the focus groups you're doing, or you're not seeing that?
I think so. I mean, it's typically sometimes it's just split, but I think that there are elements of cases that people can get behind. And I think that, the plaintiff's bar is really good about sharing information about how they're trying cases and what is happening. And I think that that significantly increases everybody's ability to get the verdict. But, as far as being able to say, because we do so many different styles of focus groups, I don't force people into doing like, this is the one format I do and that is it. I mean, I really try to be flexible with what is the issue you're trying to solve, or maybe you're just brand new and we're just going to do, just a real basic one that significantly helps people. But it's hard for me to say, well, we always do a win-loss in every, focus group. We just don't always do that because that's not always the purpose of the focus group.
How often is the purpose what you're going to ask for at trial?
Pretty often, because that's one of the number one things people come to me because they're terrified. They want to know how to ask for it, and they want to know, is this a good number or not? And it's pretty frequently that people come to me with questions about value.
How do you teach how to ask for it, the how part?
Well, everyone's a little different on this, so I don't necessarily always teach people the how, but typically what we do is when we have somebody who comes in and they say, I'm curious about value. Here's what I think. Here's what the defense is doing. And here's all our evidence. Typically what we're going to get back is, it's people are way off the mark, or I don't get it. And it's sometimes hard to put it into a vacuum, because even if we do the best mock ever, there are still elements of trial that significantly help with value that we can't imitate in a focus group. But I mean, what I tell people is typically like, here's the hole that you're having. Like, and again, what I see a lot of times is people just over relying on the life care plan, and there's a hole in the life care plan. And I'll tell people, like, unless your person is, 100% using this particular thing, or like, you kind of need to take that out of your life care plan, like, or you need to have somebody come in and explain, or the lost wages is always one of those places, or, hey, you need to go get a coworker to talk about these different things. So typically what I do is say, okay, this is the value you want. Here's what we heard. Here are the ways to put this in there, right? So that when you get to closing, you're going to feel comfortable with that number. Here in Texas, we have a pretty significant Supreme Court case that really, we had people who were, nothing wrong with this, hey, this is how much we pay for a fighter jet pilot. This is, but we value the life over the plane. That's not the exact argument, by the way, but I'm just giving an example.
Right,
But
right.
in the Supreme Court case, it was like, okay, you have to tie it. Like, the number, even for everything, has to be tied back to something specific in testimony. So people are like, really fine tooth combing things, which I think is great. We should be doing anyhow, but like, so that we don't get those verdicts taken away. And so, teaching people how to do the number, there are, like I said, several approaches to that. And people have to get so comfortable like with their number, and that's kind of half the battle is like, okay, are you comfortable or are you cringing? Like, okay, now how, are we going to talk about do some jury selection questions? Are you going to put an opening? Like, how are you going to kind of plant it here and there? So it's very personal, I think, but I think most people, I think the way that Sorry Elawvate's doing it is helpful. And I think there are other ways that people are doing it as that can help you get ready to feel comfortable with that.
What's the analysis of the focus group process look like for you? Is there some kind of memo or analytical document that goes through and provides feedback? Or how are you getting the results to the lawyers who hire you to do the focus groups? What does the format of that look like?
Yeah, so typically if we run a focus group, we're going to stick around afterwards and we're going to do just a debrief because I want to hear what you heard. And I want you to hear what I heard. And then typically what I'll do is I'll go back through the transcript. If we have, votes or things like that, kind of put that into a report and then just basically having that debrief together to give them, some ideas. Cause sometimes people will think, oh, this is what I heard. But then I can tell them that's just one person. Just one person kept saying the same thing over and over again. And that's not necessarily what everybody else was listening to, but then I go back and reread the transcript and we put together a report that kind of has the main takeaways. And, if we had some votes, then it'll break down, here's the percentage of what was on your client. And here's what happened after the defense opening. And, here are the things that they wrote in the chat, but here's what they said. So don't, that's one of the things I always try to do is try to tell people, okay, so we heard from Bob, Bob was saying this, but that's not what Bob was writing down. So like, just, take that for a grain of salt. Bob's probably not telling us 100% what's on his mind. There's a little bit of validity concerns there with our Bob over here, or here's, we're going to put Steve on this particular paradigm, but we're, don't necessarily think that Steve represents everybody who's going to be on the jury pool.
Do you have your focus group folks deliberate at all among each other on the issues? Or are they talking
Sometimes
mainly?
we do. Sometimes we do. And, what ends up happening is, I think what probably we've seen, like what most of the deliberations I watch is they're just drawing straws. They're not putting really a lot of effort into it, or one person kind of dominates and you can't hear anybody else. So when we do a debrief, I always come back, or when we do a deliberation, I come back in and I'm like, okay, let me break. Y'all need to tell me now. So then I kind of ask them a lot of questions and make them kind of tell me more about their individual thoughts.
I saw on your website you're a big runner. Is that still the case?
Yeah. I enjoy getting out there. And
do you have any pointers for Rahul and his getting his children in shape?
No, not really, other than, what motivates most of us, which is like, if you do this, you can have that.
Yeah, the carrot, the stick.
That's right. That's right.
No, there is a happy ending. Elizabeth, I forced my middle child to go running with me, and he was upset the whole time, but I wanted to teach him like mental toughness. And he is a sophomore in high school and on the track team. Look at that. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Wow, that's impressive.
And he still says
What's he running?
I think the 200 and 400.
Oh my
So,
gosh, those are hard
yeah.
races.
Yeah. He's a fast kid.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I was long and slow. I mean, I was cross country, I could get a little bit faster, did hurdles and things like that. But I mean, I enjoyed running. So that's why I still do it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so tell us about your podcast. I know you have a podcast that's designed to help trial lawyers prepare for trial. What kind of topics do you cover, and how do people locate that if they're interested in listening to more?
Absolutely. Trial Lawyer Prep. It's been out there. I think I'm starting on my 4th year, so I'm a little behind you guys.
It's not a competition.
I thought it was. I'm trying to get the lobster. So typically, a lot of how-to. I mean, I am all about helping other lawyers run their own Zoom focus groups. So there's a lot of how-to about Zoom focus groups. I really have always been drawn to helping clients get ready for deposition or trial testimony. So there's a lot about preparation for that. And then a lot of it is just different things about strategy, getting people to even just start thinking about it. What does it even mean? Breaking down communication and persuasion. A lot of things that come from working. Oh, hey, here's one of the things we stumbled across, like, let me just tell you what we learned, or, so just different things about helping people kind of get started in it, thinking about it. And then I always try to have some of my folks come on and tell people their experience. Like, we had Michelle Gessner. She had an amazing verdict against Wells Fargo recently. And so she came in and did 2 episodes to kind of talk about how she used focus groups from a very, what I would say, low to the ground, didn't have a lot of money to invest, right? So how'd she get $21 million? Right? What'd she do? And her formula was just basically to do the opening statement over and over again until she felt so comfortable and knowing exactly what they needed to hear, because she had 15 minutes in voir dire. So she was like, okay, that's easy. I know only in 15 minutes, I got 2 questions here, but what's really going to be weighing on them is that opening statement. So I think it's fun to have people come in and really dive deep on some of that stuff, because then it overcomes people's fear of, like, I'm not going to know what I'm going to get, or I don't know how to use them. Because again, I feel like everybody who's going to be trying cases should be doing at least a Zoom focus group to get those issue spots, those blind spots that we may not be able to see.
Yeah, and part of it, I think, is whether you gain anything valuable from the focus group itself or not, but you inevitably will, just the discipline of having to prepare your case, to think about it critically, and to go through that process has value in and of itself, I think. I mean, just like anything else, you need to practice, you need to think, you need to prepare, The idea that you just go into court now and wing it I don't think that works very well for most people.
Yeah, it doesn't. And like people will, and I'm sure you guys have probably talked about this, like, kind of Frankenstein style, take a little bit from this and do a little bit from that, and maybe a little rules of the road and a little bit of this. And, like, you don't really have a good cohesive, like, thought process. And so it's like, oh, well, you're going to do that thing, I'm going to do this thing. And critical thinking about the whole picture, I think, is sometimes what gets lost when you're trying to kind of piecemeal things and try it out. Now, I know, having listened to your podcasts, people who try cases, they go and listen and they're like, okay, I'm going to try this little piece. We're going to keep with our strategy here. So, I mean, I think you nailed it. And that's a big piece that people miss, is when you take that step to do a focus group, even if it's just a simple 1-hour focus group, you're going to sit down and have to prepare and think through all the information, get ready. And that's just something you wouldn't do unless you're doing a focus group or a mock jury. And I think it significantly helps you start your mind thinking about it for trial.
You stay in touch with Keenan at all?
Mm-hmm.
I saw him in California last year briefly. It was great to see him. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years before that. And he seems like he's doing well now, which is nice.
Yeah,
Nice
I think he is doing better. And they just had a Ben Mal seminar in person down in Florida. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Elizabeth, if folks want to reach out and find you and get your help doing focus groups, how do they do so?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go probably to my website, and that's just my name, elizabethlarrick.com. And then, take it from there. The podcast is also located on there as well.
Awesome. Well, you're in the running now for the lobsters. Well,
I hope so. No, I enjoyed coming on. And like I said, really my focus, my target is to get people to kind of start doing this in their own office. And then if you need extra help, like, there are lots of lovely people, out there to help people and to do big data, absolutely. I just think, let's dip our toe in the water. Let's do a little Zoom focus group and really kind of open our eyes. And I always think too, helping it prepare makes you think critically, but also talking out loud your case really helps your communication skills.
yeah, I agree. And I think a barrier for a lot of people, like you said, is they're just busy and sometimes it might seem cost prohibitive. So being able to reach out to someone like you who knows how to do it, can talk them through it, or can just do it for them, at least the first time, or it just makes it turnkey and easy. And for some people, that's what they need. They just need to be able to push the button and make it happen. I think that's a great service you're offering. So thank you for doing that. And thanks for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
No, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.